Welcome to the All Out Leadership Podcast, hosted by Pastor Eric Lawson, where each episode is uniquely designed to help you live all out by bringing you practical leadership from a biblical perspective delivered in 10 minutes or less. So whether you're a business leader, serving in ministry, or simply looking to grow in your leadership, this podcast is for you. Before we dive into this week's topic, make sure to subscribe to the podcast and download the show notes at ericlawson.com/podcast. And while you're at it, feel free to share the content on social media. Now, let's join Pastor Eric for this week's conversation.
Welcome to another edition of the All Out Leadership Podcast. We are continuing in the life of David, and we're picking up this week where David has been inaugurated. He's now king of Israel and Judah. And what we see in David is an important principle. It's the first 90 days of your new position as a leader. Often you'll hear it referred to as 30, 60, and 90, and that's actually what we're going to be talking about today, is the first 30, 60, and 90 days in any new leadership position. Let me read to you 1 Chronicles chapter 13 and verse 1. Then David consulted with the captain of thousands and of hundreds and of every leader. And David said to all the assembly of Israel, if it seems good to you, and if it is of the Lord our God, let us send out to our brethren everywhere who are left in all the land of Israel, and with them to the priests and Levites who are in all their cities and their common lands, that they may gather together to us. And let us bring the ark of our God back to us, for we have not inquired at it since the days of Saul. Then all the assembly said that they would do so, for the thing was right in the eyes of all the people. One of the worst things a leader can do is right out of the gate come in and make a bunch of big changes and come in and just kind of put their opinion everywhere and on everything. And we don't see David doing that. What we really see David applying is the wisdom of teams. He's using a very high level of emotional intelligence because he's harnessing the opinion of people. What he's really applying is a great principle, and it's called weigh-in for buy-in. He has an idea. He's letting the people weigh in, because when they're weighing in, they ultimately get buy-in. The Hebrew word consulted means to consult together, to exchange counsel, and to deliberate. Again, we see David, he is a very strong leader who has enough security in himself and his own identity that he's able to harness the opinions of others and leverage the experience around him. Now, what we look at inside of 30, 60, 90 is a rule of thumb. It's not necessarily a biblical commandment. There's not a Bible verse that says, thou shalt not make any decisions, thou shalt not exercise authority in the first 90 days. It's really just more of a rule of thumb. If you were to go to a doctor, and let's say it's a brand new doctor, and they were to discover cancer, but he wants to build equity emotionally with you and relational equity. He's not going to wait 90 days to tell you, hey, we got cancer, we need to operate, we need to deal with it. If you're taking over a particular situation, maybe it's a new management, maybe you stepped in as a CEO, you stepped into a C-suite of some kind, whatever it is, and all of a sudden you see something very cancerous, and if you don't deal with it immediately, the company's going to suffer. It might be life-threatening. There are times you have to make decisions. There's just times a crisis happens. It doesn't mean you don't act. But the general rule of thumb is, if it's allowed, to try to build emotional equity using the 30, 60, and 90-day approach. So let's just go ahead and unpack that just for a moment. What does that first 30 days, what could it look like? The first thing is learn. Just be a learner. That first 30 days, do everything that you can to learn. What you're learning is the names of all the people. You're learning their titles. You're learning positions. You're learning the history of that organization. You're learning about the culture. You're learning about, were there any milestones of great significance that you need to understand that were pivot points inside of the company. Do everything you can to be a sponge. Carry a notepad. Take notes of what's good. Take notes of what things you might go, we might want to address this in the future, but really focus the next 30 days on being a learner. Don't come in as the expert. Don't come in as the know-it-all, because ultimately what's going to happen is you may be the expert, you may be the know-it-all, but you're going to build resentment inside of the people. What you're really looking to do is build trust with your team, to build credibility and to build respect with your team, because you're going to use that trust and that level of respect to help get things done in the future. You may be able to come in and just leverage your title, leverage your experience, but ultimately people are going to resent changes that you're making, because it might be their ideas that you're actually changing and you didn't even realize some of the hidden landmines that were there. So don't come in as the answer man. Now, on the next 30 to 60, 90 days, lean on your team. So the first 30 days, you're coming in learning. Then you're leaning on side of your team. Now that you kind of have an assessment of the status of the organization, what's good, what you go, we might want to address these particular things. Now you could start to lean on your team with meetings to where you can bring up some of these ideas. Hey guys, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? What's your opinion on this? And you're kind of just slowly navigating for them to begin to share their ideas. You're getting their way in for buy-in again, and you're harnessing and bringing them together for collaboration where people can begin to start to take some ownership for these different things. Don't come in as the leader who doesn't value the opinions of other people. Don't be that leader who goes, when I want your opinion, I'll give it to you. That's just really bad leadership, because you're asking for people's opinions, because you're inviting them for feedback, because you're bringing them in to be part of the solution. It shows that you're a strong leader. It shows that you value their opinion. And again, that's a critical part of building trust with your team. David did this. He went to the top. You'll notice the sequence. David went to the captain of thousands. So he started with the most influential. Then he went to the hundreds. And then the Bible says he went to every leader. David valued the person who was the janitor's opinion, and he valued who was, one of the executives inside of that organization as well. Sam Walton was the founder of Walmart, was known for this. He would go down and sit at the shipping docks and bring food to the guys, or pizza to the guys, and hang out and talk and get their opinion and get their feedback. Lee Iacocca, when he had taken over Chrysler, he had also done this. He went down to the assembly lines and he got people's opinions and got feedback, because you don't necessarily know how things really work sitting up in an ivory tower, or the leadership management team sitting up in an ivory tower. They don't have the true pulse of the organization. It's the people who are out there doing it. One of the big hotel brands actually requires all of their executives to go spend a week working in different positions inside of those different hotels. They're going to be busboys. They're going to be, working and cleaning the rooms. They're going to be in the kitchen. They're going to be at the front desk. And they have to go work all those positions, because as they're rubbing shoulders with the people that are having to do this, what they're really finding out is all the policies they made up there in some high places. They're going to find out how it actually impacts real life in the real world. So this allows you to really stay in touch and keep a pulse with your people as you're leading them as well. Then in the next 60 to 90 days, then go ahead and start to lead through your team. So as you've been having these strategy meetings, these brainstorming meetings, these focus groups, whatever you want to call them, there are probably a variety of different type of meetings you're going to be having where you're gathering and you're leaning and leading through your team. Now you can really begin to start leading through the team. Rather than you making all these decisions, you can harness your team's experience to go, all right, what do you guys think? All right, now who's going to own that? Okay, great. You're going to own that. And then you start to delegate that, and you really can begin to work this project as a team, which that would be a future podcast as well, just how to do some great project management through teams. But so we want to recap this. Come in as a learner in those first 30 days. Then you want to come in where you're leaning on your team. And then finally, you can go ahead and start leading through your team. Just some practical advice we see applied in the life of David on the first 30, 60, and 90 days as a leader.
Thank you for joining us on the All Out Leadership Podcast. We hope you gained new biblical insight that challenged you to grow in your leadership. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, we would love your help in getting the content out farther. You can help by subscribing to the podcast at ericlawson.com/podcast and telling others about it. Next week, Pastor Eric will be back with another episode. So until then, we hope you have a great week being an all-out leader.